Now that we have everything set up, we can go ahead and start modeling the vehicle. The first thing we're going to do is to model the guide mesh. The guide mesh is what is going to help us to create the panels we see on the vehicle, like the front fender, the doors, the hood. So let's just assume there are no cut lines in these body panels. So say from the hood to the fender, you don't have this line. From the fender to the front piece or front bumper piece, there is no line here. Let's say from the front fender to the left driver door, there is no line here. You get the idea. So let's say all these lines or these cut lines that you see do not exist. Now if you take a look up here, the black piece we have up here, we're going to do that separately. So we're going to consider all of these, this green area, including this small piece up here which is black. We're going to consider all that to be one guide mesh, and we're going to consider all the pieces up here as well to be another guide mesh. So in total we should have two main guide meshes which we're going to be creating the panels off of. The first one we're going to make is the bigger one, the bigger green area. Now what we're going to do first is to create lines. We're going to use a vertex and then create lines along the edges we see in this green area. So we'll create lines for this edge here, lines for this edge here, lines for the edge. Any edge you see that looks like an edge, or any side of the car, any part of the car you see that looks like an edge, we're going to create edges along that line with vertices. So let's get started on that. So we're going to move our mouse to this area right here, and we're going to hit Shift and S. We're going to select cursor toward origin. Now I'm going to press Shift and A and then add in a mesh plane. I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to press X, and I'm going to select collapse edges and faces. So we have a single vertex here. Get out of edit mode and then try to select the vertex mesh that we have right now in object mode. As you can see up here, it's in Image Studio, so it can't be selected. So I'm going to enable the mouse icon over here, and I want to bring down this menu, and I should select the plane right here. We can just drag it and move it into the guide meshes here, so it's a part of the guide meshes and not the Image Studio. So I'm going to collapse this collection and disable the icon again, so nothing is selectable. Now that we have this over here, let's rename this and call it the body guide mesh, like that. Now the next thing we're going to do is to re-enable this Image Studio. Now you'll know why in a second. We're going to take this vertex here, right? I'm going to snap it to one of the empties over here. You remember I mentioned these empties are going to help us locate where some of these body parts should be, or vertices or edges should be. Now I want to select this one right here, which is over here, and press Shift and S and say cursor to selected. Now the next thing we'll do is to take this mesh here, the guide mesh, go into edit mode where we have just a single vertex in it. I want to press Shift and S and say selection to cursor. Alright, so that should snap it in all directions in the image that we have. Now we're working on the front end of the car right now, so I'm just going to zoom in until we have that visible in all of it. Now what I'm going to do is to change this one right here to an image that would help us more than this one. So I'm going to say maybe 103. Yes, this one right here. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is to take that vertex we have and then extrude it in the x-axis to about the center. Now one thing we have to do first before we extrude any further is to add in a mirror modifier. Now if your object is not mirroring on the direct left side of your viewport, press Ctrl and A and then select rotation, and that should snap it or move it to the left side. Now that we have added in the mirror modifier, what we're going to do in the mirror modifier is to make sure we enable clipping. Now I'm going to press G and then X and then make sure it merges directly in the center, like that. Now if you take a look here, you can see we have the vertex floating from the edge we intend to align it to. Hit G and then Z and move this down to about here. Now if you take a look here, you can see it's not on the edge. So basically what we're going to do is to move them in either of the three axes, the Z axis, the Y axis, or the X axis, to try and then match it on all the images on where it is supposed to be. So over here on this image, it is supposed to be right here or somewhere in the center here. And over here on this image, we can't really see where it should be, but it should appear to be somewhere in that area. Over here, it should be somewhere here, up here. And then over here, it should be where it is right now. So we're going to make sure they are all in that same area at the same time, and then we're good to go. So down here where we have the white vehicle, I'm going to press G and then Y and move this in the Y. Now notice as I move it in the Y axis, the other angles you can see is displacing, which means they are moving out of place. Now this is where the difficulty kind of comes in, because you have to try and move them in specific axes without displacing them in the other angles. So we're going to move up here, and then we're going to press G and Z and move this up until it lies directly on it. And if you take a look down here, you can see it moved again. If I should undo and redo, you can see it moved. So I'm just going to move it again in the Y till it's directly on it. So you can see just doing it bit by bit kind of puts it in place, because right now you can see it sits directly where it is supposed to be. If you take a look here, this is it right here. I know you might be fooled, you'd think it has to be somewhere over here, but that is the correct position, because this is a perspective image, not an orthographic one. So it makes sense. So what I will do now is to add in a vertex to about here. I'm going to move that vertex onto the edge where it is supposed to be. So I'll move it in Y, and I'll try to align it with this edge we have up here. So I'm just going to move it in the X a bit to about here. Now move it in the Y a bit to about there. Now let's look up here. It's close enough. So I'm just going to press G and then Z and move this down until it is on the edge like that. I'm going to move this back a bit like that. Okay, so right now we don't exactly need the vertex to be exactly where it is right now. That is where the empty is. I'm going to press G twice to slide it to the left a bit until we have that yellow line. And I'm going to press C to lock the axis. And then we're going to slide it forward to about somewhere here, like this. Now I'm going to press G and then Y to move it until it lies on the edge right here. You can see it's also on the edge right here. So I'm going to press G twice and move it out just a bit, like that. Now, between this vertex and this vertex, we're going to have to add in some more vertices. So I'm going to press Ctrl and R, and I'm going to type in 5 vertices. I'm going to press Enter. Now I can just take this and press Shift and S and say Selection to Cursor, like that. And then I'm going to take this one, press G and then Y, and move it back a bit to about there. And I'm pretty much going to do the same thing for the rest we see here. Alright, that's looking great. Now I'm going to try and align them in this view we're seeing here. So now I'm going to take all of these vertices. We're going to select this, select that, select it all the way here. That's one way to do it. Or you could just left click on this, hold down Control, and then left click on this to select the whole thing. Now this is where the Loop Tools add-on we enabled is going to come into play. So we're going to make sure the edges between each of these vertices is the same. That is, the distance between them are equal, very equal. So to do this, with left click, select Loop Tools, and then select Space. Now you can see I have a shortcut bound to it right here, and that's my mouse button 4. Now if you want to assign this shortcut to any key on your keyboard or on your mouse, what you have to do is to just right click on this. Now let me remove mine first. So I'm going to remove the shortcut, and I'm just going to right click, say Assign Shortcut, and then you're going to press a key right after that. So any key you press right after selecting Assign Shortcut is going to be the key that uses the Loop Tool Space option for you. Not sure if that makes sense. So in my case, it's going to be the mouse button 4. So I'm going to press the mouse button 4 like this. And there you go. So anytime I press the mouse button 4, it should evenly space them out for me. Now the next thing we'll do is to add in extra vertices between these two vertices. So I'm going to press Ctrl and R, and I'm going to type in 4, press Enter to confirm it. So just like we did with the other one, we're going to align them with the edges in all the views we have in our viewport. Okay, very nice. What I'm going to do now is to get out of the camera view here in this viewport area by pressing numpad 0 so we can see what we have so far and take a look at it. So yeah, so far so good. I'm going to look at it to the front view, make sure the lines are following very seamlessly. Now this one here, I think I'm going to move down just slightly so it follows it much nicely, like that. I'm going to get to the side, make sure that is the case here too. So you can see we have some issues here. So I'm just going to fix that by moving these around, just to kind of follow the line a bit more. Now you can notice I'm not doing this with the background image we have enabled. You can do it with it, but you won't really see the difference when you have the image helping you out. It's why I came out of the camera view and tried to do this on my own. Now if you take a look at it, in the images you can see they didn't move as much and they didn't cause any much problems. So yeah, there you go. Now in the most case, we are going to be seeing things like this, where the edges or the faces or the vertices are not going to be matching with the images. Now I assure you that that is fine, and that is due to some perspective changes in the images that can be calculated well to make it fit as accurate as possible when we model it out. So something like this is perfectly fine. It's not going to cause much of a problem. So if you should see them in any part of the project as we go, that shouldn't be too much of a concern for you. We'll try to fix it as much as possible, but trust me, it will work out great in the final model. Alright, so now the idea is to use the same technique to kind of create edges all around the edges like I pointed in the beginning, and try to place vertices in all the areas that is needed. So I'm going to start with this area right here. I'm going to extrude it down in the z-axis to about here. I'm going to make sure it aligns in all of the angles. So sometimes it will be good to just freely move the vertex instead of locking it to a specific axis. So in this case right here, I'm just going to press G, and I'm not going to lock any axes. I'm just going to move this freely to about where I want it to be. So right about here. I'm just going to move this in the x-axis like this. I'm just going to use just about the same technique to kind of make sure they are all sitting in the areas they're meant to be. I think that is close enough. I'm going to take this now, and I'm going to extrude it, this vertex here. I'm going to have that selected. I'm going to press extrude, that's E on your keyboard, and then X. We're going to constrain it to the x-axis and move it all the way to the center where it clips, like that. And I'm going to left click to confirm it. Now we're going to move that vertex along the y-axis by pressing G and then Y, and moving this back to about right there, like that. So all we have to worry about now is the z-axis. So I'm just going to press G and then Z and move this here. We're pretty much going to do the same thing until it sits on the edge right here. Now the idea of doing this is to just basically be moving them in specific axes, or if needed sometimes you move them freely. So I'm mostly going to be time-lapsing in most of the parts of this series, because if I should go through every single thing and every single step, it's going to take us hours upon hours to finish this. So for example, this area here between this vertex and this vertex, I am going to time-lapse right now. So just like that, you can see we have it all aligned in the images. Now, just like I did with the previous one here, I used a combination of moving it in a specific axis to match it to the edges, and then also the loop tools add-on to evenly space them out, as you can see here. Alright, so now what we'll do is to add in 2 vertices over in this area right here, and then let's move it in the x-axis, all of the axes, to try and then match it into place. Okay, very nice. Now if you take a look at this vertex here, you can see I extended it beyond the edge where it is supposed to be. Now the reason why I did this is if we go ahead later and then we add in a subdivision surface, it's going to automatically round this off to follow the edge. So if I should demonstrate for you right now, I'm going to add in a subdivision surface right now, and let's say level 2. I'm going to add in a vertex right here and another one right here. So you can see the final line kind of follows the edge right here. So it's the reason why I kind of offsetted it off the edge a bit like that. Now let me reset this back to what we have. Okay, very nice. So far so good. Now the next edge lines we're going to be creating is the one we have in the middle of the hood here. So this area right here. Let's get started on that. So I'm going to take this vertex here, or these two vertices, and I'm going to press Shift and D and move it up in a Z like this. I'm going to make sure we match it in this view right here. Make sure it's matched in all of the views. So like that. And maybe in the Y. So it seems to be matched quite easily. As a matter of fact, let's do the same thing with these ones right here. So I'm just going to move it here and move it in a Y. So here like this. Like that. And I'm going to take these two and press F to fill in the space. Let me just take this and move it back a bit, I think. It's not too visible because the image is white, but I'm pretty sure I have a good idea where it's supposed to be. So we should be good. Alright, now I'm going to make this one here the active vertices after selecting all these four. So I'm going to start by clicking on this vertex here, holding down Control, and then clicking on this one to select all of them, and then making sure this one here is the active element. So now I'm going to press period on my keyboard, and I'm going to select active element, and I'm going to press S and then Y to scale it in the Y axis. I'm just going to scale it slightly to kind of match the other two vertices here as much as possible, like that. Alright, very nice. Okay, so what I'll do here now is to take this vertex, and I'm going to press G twice to slide it to the left a bit, and then I press C to align it, or to lock the alignment, and move it out a bit to about there. I'm going to just select all of this edge, and then press my shortcut for the Loop Tools space option to evenly space them out like this. Alright, very nice. So I'm going to take this edge now, or this vertex here, and extrude it in the y-axis all the way to the back about there, like this. So now we have to make sure that vertex aligns over here in all of the views that we have available here in our viewport. Okay, there we go. That was easier than I expected. So now we're going to add in vertices between this vertex and this one, and then to try and then align that to the edge line that we see here, and also here, and then here. So we're going to add in a total of 6 vertices here. Press Ctrl R and then hit the number 6 on your numpad to add in 6 vertices in here. Left click and you should be good. Alright, so we're going to try and then use the same method as we've been doing before to try and then align this with the edges we have in the viewport. Alright, so far so good. Now what I'm going to do is cycle through the images to try and see if everything is looking good so far. Alright, seems to be looking solid. Let's go back to the first frame. Alright, so let's use that technique to finish all of the edges that we see in the front area here. So this, and then this one to about the fender, and then we'll see what we can do about the rest. So let's do that now. So for these two here, I'm just going to press F to align this area much better. Okay, so for this area right here, I'm going to switch the images to a different one. So I'm just going to cycle through here to get this image here so I can work with this area. If you take a look at the top right image, you can see the edges are not aligning with the image. Now that's totally fine. This is one of the areas I mentioned earlier in the tutorial series about not matching with the images. So just leave it as it looks right now in mine and then proceed with modeling the car.